What is the situation with the Diaoyu Islands? Are they an example of an emboldened China? Or should they truly be under the sovereignty of China, as China says? In 1874, the islands were stripped from the Chinese by the Japanese. In a post-war settlement, the Japanese insisted that all treaties signed with China before 1941 were null and void. The consequences of this treaty abrogation belongs to another discussion, but suffice it to say, the nullification of the treaties was a means of ending the unfair position of Japan vis-a-vis her neighbors before and during the Second World War. It did mean, however, that Japan could redefine China, and redefine she did. For a while, the Republic of China, Taiwan, became her definition of China. The Japanese relinquished the Diaoyu Islands, which were then deemed to be in the purview of the newly defined term China, or Republic of China, which was then defined as China. Therefore, the Chinese People's Republic was insulted twice over. First of all, that Taiwan was not deemed a part of her territorial integrity, and secondly, that the stolen independence of Taiwan would be receiving dominion over the stolen Diaoyu Islands. It was a double slap. In fact, the United States and Japan signed the Okinawan Reversion Treaty in 1971, permitting the return of Okinawa to Japan, as well as the Diaoyu Islands. Okinawa, Taiwan, the Honshu, and the Diaoyu Islands, amongst others, were traditionally Chinese territory. Therefore, in the Chinese view, the Japanese slavers now had two pieces of traditional Chinese territory. The claim of Okinawa by China reached far into Chinese history as undisputed pieces of Chinese territorial integrity. Understanding the Chinese point of view, the desire to have her territory returned to her was simply the same desire as Germany held with its wish to reunite and get back land stolen by the Soviet Union, for Poland to be resurrected from its division by Austria, Russia, and Germany. Respecting Chinese sovereignty is a first requirement for stability in the region, and certainly would show basic, yes, altogether now, respect. Without it, the contentious issues may be forced upon the world in a way no one wishes them to be. However, theory and reality rarely partner at the world dance. Understanding the history, however, clarifies the present. But we still can't answer with certainty the issue raised by Professor Christensen. Are problems in the region a result of an emboldened China, or a result of a vacuum left by an economically weakened United States? With the diminished America, does China now feel strong enough to assert the absolute rights of her historical nation? Even if the American presence is not really weakened, there is a sense that America has been diminished in Asia. Perhaps the weakened American economy has exasperated Chinese behavior, but it is a continuation of a changing role for the United States vis-a-vis Asia. There is, however, another factor in considering Chinese behavior, but before we continue, we might simply admit that China might just be right. After all, we allowed Israel to come back into existence as a geographical reality. Why not extend the same to China? Well, perhaps it's only for certain various reasons, none shall be mentioned here, but also because we don't want an Israel duplicated and all of its problems showing up in East Asia. Maybe, perhaps. The newly discovered presence of a lush potential in hydrocarbon finds off of the Diaoyu Islands has resurrected the dormant issue of territorial rights, which had lapsed for decades amongst the three littoral powerhouses, Korea, the People's Republic of China, and Japan. Without a clarification of the dispute, Dangerous occurrences have stretched the patience of the participants to the issue. A group of Japanese right-wing youths have planted a flag on the Diaoyu Islands and twice built a lighthouse on the islands in defiance of China and in defense of the Japanese right to the islands. The People's Republic of China, the Chinese in Hong Kong and Taiwan have all lodged protests against these activities on the part of the Japanese, forming a rare soiree of common purpose, one that we should look at very carefully. China continues her dispute over the Nansha Spratly Islands, where a Filipino military boat took a Chinese ship. Present in these islands are military from Taiwan, Vietnam, the Philippines, the People's Republic of China, and others. China wants the issue of the island's rightful ownership argued before the United Nations. China claims the islands as part of her territorial integrity. Oil is at the bottom of the dispute, as well as the Chinese claims of sovereignty over the islands. China wants the issue settled by settling issues of the extension of the continental shelf below the islands. Like the Diaoyu Islands, China wants complete rights in the islands, while the Chinese place the rights to the Diaoyu Islands as far back as 1407 Anno Domini. It places the right to the Hansha Islands to 200 Anno Domini during the Han Dynasty. Aside from territorial issues, Christensen pointed to other issues with the United States. The Americans wanted the Chinese to get a handle on hacking that sieved through Google China. The China-Google crossfire has been ongoing for several years and stretches into offensive behavior as the Chinese see it. And that was a salient point made by Christensen, that China wants the world to see things from her perspective, for once. Google terminated censorship caps in China, which spelled its doom. Even our website, West East Bridge, cannot be seen in China to this day. Another issue raised by the American government over and over again is intellectual property rights. I wonder if the government is really serious about this issue. When we were in Taiwan, one of my husband's students took us to a bookstore. There on the shelf were many copies of my husband's book. It was meant as a laugh. But what sort of laugh is it if the issue is raised before China, when the practice is common in the neighborhood? Not in either case is it funny, but in the case of Taiwan, we don't bat an eye. At least we still send them arms. And I haven't seen any demands made of Taiwan, or threats, such as withholding a weapon or two, on the issue of intellectual property rights. The Americans want an end to carbon copy goods, which have proven to be inferior and which have impacted on the American military. But it may be prescient to set aside these relatively smaller issues with small gain. Set them aside to consider the greater issues of competition, and not just market competition. Hint, does the word hegemony conjure up anything? Information control is critical to China. If the general stability of China can be gauged as existing since the now long ago Tiananmen Square situation of over 22 years ago, labor problems herein are excluded, Chinese censoring can be more fully understood. It certainly is accepted by Western businesses, who may even prefer things the way they've become since the now ancient history of Tiananmen Square. Who wants their factory sacked anyway by a discontented population? This is a question matched by who keeps those factories from being sacked anyway. Evidently, American businesses have profited from the resultant secured environment, which has ushered in relative stability. Certainly gone are the days when deaths were suffered by esteemed leaders such as Hu Yaobang as a result of suppressive political actions. Hu, incidentally, has been resurrected in recent years by the Chinese leadership, showing respect for his memory. Perhaps it is a realization that 100 years have passed since the astonishing creation of the state of modern China by Dr. Sun Yat-sen, that the Chinese leadership is intent on respecting what China has evolved into, despite differences of political opinion and differences of ruling philosophy. Those issues may have been happily marginalized, with the growing prosperity and pride in their country by the majority of Chinese. Surprisingly, but not for all, a new attitude toward Chiang Kai-shek is emerging and just may be symptomatic of attempts to heal and unify, now that economic stability has led to a stable political system, despite what critics might charge. The fact that Taiwan and China have joined together against the Japanese claims is a sign of change. The fact of censoring has not tempered foreign investments and trade with China, at least at any significant level. Stability has bred a good business environment. There is no doubt about that. If continued growth of the Chinese economy and foreign interest in China is any measure of censorship policies, then censorship must be deemed a positive policy. Right or wrong, the issue is mute in the commercial sphere, and it remains entirely impossible for us to understand. But it is apparently the reality. China is getting to be China. Her logic and understanding of herself is emerging. The sense of the miracle of what she has wrought over the last 100 years seems to be creating a patience and understanding of itself, with itself.